$161 billion in profit in a single year from one company. Let that sit for a moment, because that number is not revenue. That is not sales. That is profit. Money left over after every cost, every salary, every expense has been paid. And it is more profit than Apple, Microsoft, and Google made combined in the same year. Now here is what makes this genuinely difficult to comprehend. The company that generated that profit exists in a country that, 100 years ago, was unmapped desert. There were no roads, no schools, no hospitals, no running water. The people who lived there were Bedouin tribes who had roamed the same sand for centuries, largely unknown to the outside world. So how does something like that happen? How does a nation go from borrowed gold coins to the single most profitable company ever to exist on planet Earth in less than a century? This is that story. And I promise you, by the time it is over, you will not be able to believe it is real. The Arabian Peninsula in the early 20th century was, by almost every measure, one of the most hostile and least understood places on the surface of the Earth. The Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, covered an area larger than France. Temperatures reached 70 degrees Celsius. There were no maps worth trusting. Entire expeditions had vanished trying to cross it. And yet, into this landscape, a man was building a nation. Abdulaziz ibn Saud was a warrior. By 1932, he had done the seemingly impossible, unified dozens of rival clans and kingdoms into a single sovereign state. He called it the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He named it after himself. But here is the problem nobody talks about. Ibn Saud had a country. He had no money to run it. The kingdom's primary source of income was the Hajj. When the Great Depression devastated global economies in the 1930s, pilgrim numbers collapsed. Ibn Saud was, by any honest accounting, nearly bankrupt. And then the Americans arrived. Standard Oil of California, SoCal, had a theory. Geologists believed the geological formations beneath the Arabian desert might hold oil. They had no certainty. They had no proof. Give us the right to explore your land for oil. We will pay you for the privilege. Ibn Saud agreed. He needed the money. He signed. And then came March 4th, 1938. Dammam. Well number 7. After 5 years of failed drilling, after the kind of repeated failure that breaks most men and most companies, a geyser of oil erupted from the Saudi desert with a force that physically stunned the workers standing nearby. They had not found a small deposit. They had not found a modest reserve. They had found what would eventually be confirmed as the single largest concentration of recoverable oil reserves ever discovered on Earth. The California Arabian Standard Oil Company was born. It would later be renamed the Arabian American Oil Company, Aramco. 2 men shook hands in a desert. One thought he was getting a loan, the other thought he was getting mineral rights. For decades, Aramco operated in Saudi Arabia, the way powerful foreign corporations have always operated in resource-rich developing nations. The Americans ran the company. The Americans took the majority of the profits. Saudi Arabia received royalties, a share, but the wealth, the control, and the decision-making power sat in California. It was an arrangement that had made sense in 1933, when Saudi Arabia was desperate and Standard Oil was the only player willing to gamble on the desert. Across the Arab world, a new consciousness was rising. Countries that had spent decades watching foreign powers extract their natural resources were demanding something radical: control. This is our oil. We want it back. But it was 1973 that changed everything. They cut the oil. Overnight, the price of oil quadrupled. The world had been running on Saudi oil for decades without ever truly understanding what that dependency meant. In 1973, it understood. Saudi Arabia had not merely found oil. It had found the ability to hold the entire global economy hostage. The nationalization process had already begun in 1972, when Saudi Arabia acquired a 25% stake in Aramco. After the embargo demonstrated the kingdom's true leverage, the process accelerated. By 1980, Saudi Arabia had acquired 100% of the company. Every barrel of oil produced, every dollar of profit generated, all of it now flowed directly into the treasury of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The Americans found the oil, but the Saudis understood what it was really worth. In 1950, the city of Riyadh had a population of roughly 30,000 people. It had almost no paved roads. The kingdom had no public school system, no national hospital network, no university. What happened next is the most compressed national transformation in recorded human history. Aramco's revenues did not merely enrich a royal family. They funded the construction of an entire civilization from scratch, at speed, in the middle of the desert. Thousands of kilometers of highways were laid across desert that had never felt pavement. Desalination plants were constructed to provide fresh water to cities sitting on some of the driest land on Earth. Hospitals appeared in towns that had never had a doctor. Universities were built in a country where, 2 generations earlier, almost no one was literate. And then there is the welfare state. Saudi citizens, those holding Saudi citizenship, have never paid income tax, not once. Not a single rial. Free healthcare. Free education through university. Heavily subsidized electricity, water, and fuel. Housing assistance. Government jobs for the majority of the Saudi workforce. A country built entirely on the financial foundation of one company and one resource. And now, right now as you watch this, the kingdom is doing something that has no precedent in human history. It is building a city. Not an extension of an existing city, not a new neighborhood, a completely new city in an empty stretch of desert in northwestern Saudi Arabia, to be called Neom. The projected cost is $500 billion. In less than a century, oil turned a collection of desert tribes into one of the wealthiest and most powerful nations on Earth. No country in human history has ever been transformed this fast. By 2016, a young prince named Mohammed bin Salman had risen to become the most powerful figure in Saudi Arabia outside of his father, the king. He was 30 years old. He was in a hurry. And he had looked at the same reality that every serious analyst of Saudi Arabia had been quietly discussing for years. The oil era will end, not tomorrow, not next year, but the trajectory of the global economy toward electric vehicles, toward renewable energy, toward a post-carbon future, meant that the resource which had funded everything, which had built everything, which had powered the Saudi state for 90 years, had an expiry date. Mohammed bin Salman launched Vision 2030, an audacious, sweeping plan to diversify the Saudi economy before the window closed. Tourism, technology, entertainment, finance. The goal was to build industries that could sustain the kingdom after the last barrel of oil became irrelevant. And to fund that transformation, he made a decision that shook the financial world. He would sell a piece of Saudi Aramco to the public. On December 11, 2019, Saudi Aramco listed on the Tadawul, the Saudi Stock Exchange. It raised $25.6 billion. It briefly became the first company in the history of global capitalism to be valued at over $2 trillion. $2 trillion. The entire GDP of Italy. The entire GDP of Canada, the value of one company. But beneath the triumph of the IPO and beneath the ambition of Vision 2030, there is a question that no amount of money fully answers. Can you rebuild an entire national economy in a generation? Because the clock is real. The energy transition is real. The question of what Saudi Arabia becomes after oil is the defining challenge of a nation. Saudi Aramco spent 90 years building the world's greatest oil empire. Now it has to figure out how to survive the end of oil. And it has to do it before the clock runs out. Pull back far enough from any extraordinary story, and you start to see the universal lessons inside it. The pivot came when Saudi Arabia recognized that true power was not just owning an asset. It was controlling the asset and understanding its worth in the global system. But the deeper lesson, the one that Saudi Arabia is now living through in real time, is about the danger of building everything on a single product. No business advantage is permanent. No resource monopoly lasts forever. The same extraordinary concentration of wealth that allowed Saudi Arabia to build a civilization in decades is also the source of its greatest vulnerability. The Aramco story is the greatest business origin story on Earth in many respects. The scale of discovery, the audacity of nationalization, the speed of transformation, the staggering, barely believable numbers at every stage of the journey. But it is also a story about what comes next, about a nation watching the sun set on the era that created it, and racing to build something new before the darkness arrives. One company, one country, one resource, one century. And the next chapter is still being written, in glass and sand and ambition, somewhere in the desert. Subscribe for more stories of extraordinary business empires.